We are up to Daf Kuf Nun Aleph. Ahmed Aleph. The last thing we learned was the word nechasim. What does that mean? We learned karka means karka and metalvin. We wondered about avodim, where service slaves fit in, and then we had a discussion whether karka is literally karka or or metalvin is literally metalvin. If a person leaves behind. He gives away all of his assets and leaves behind one thing, a piece of karka. Does he mean literally karka? What if I left behind a piece of metal, something portable, something mobile? Is that treated the same way? And then we discussed where avodim fit in. Then we discussed that the word nechasim is much more encompassing. It includes even your animals and includes tefillin. And then we remained a question about a sefer Torah. Now with the sefer Torah, the Gemara says the question is because maybe you're not allowed to sell it, or maybe because there are certain extenuating circumstances you're allowed to, therefore it's considered your assets. But and when we discussed, there is actually an argument if you're permitted to sell a Sefer Torah or not. Our Gemara clearly says you can't. The Rosh says you can, but the Rosh, if you look in the Rosh in the back of this Gemara here, he has a different version of our Gemara. It doesn't mention a word about not selling it. In the Gemara Megillah is a whole discussion if you're permitted to sell a Sefer Torah, an old one to buy a new one. But and we explained last time that those opinions that hold that you are permitted to sell a Sefer Torah, and what do they do with the Gemara right here? So we said it depends if you bought the Sefer Torah or if you actually wrote the Sefer Torah. If you bought it, it was already sold, so you can sell it. But if you wrote the Sefer Torah for the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah, then you should not on-sell it. And that in itself is an interesting debate that they had. There's a mitzvah of writing your own Sefer Torah. Once you wrote it, is there a mitzvah to retain it? You have to keep that Sefer Torah with you forever? Or once you wrote it, you fulfilled your mitzvah. You can then sell it. Doesn't matter. Who said you have to keep it? And that's the discussion whether you're permitted to sell even a Sefer Torah you wrote. Because if you don't have to keep it anymore, maybe you're permitted to sell it. From the Rambam, it comes out the reason why you're not allowed to sell Sefer Torah is you're treating it like a commodity, not like a holy book. And therefore, it's a bezoin, or a lack of covered HaTorah. There's a big argument whether the action Isser from the Torah to sell a Sefer Torah or it's only an Isser the Rabbanon. So we're up to the Gemara here, the Kuf Nun Aleph, right after the parentheses, about 3 lines above the white lines. We're going to learn a number of instances where somebody was dying and left something behind. So let me just quickly refresh your memory. There really 3 different examples. 4. You have a concept called a shchivra who's dying and distributes his property. So if this shchivra is distributing all of his or her property, all of it means leaving nothing behind. In other words, they believe they're about to pass away. Then the law is as follows. Whatever he says or she says is treated as if it's final, and that you don't need a kinyan in this case. But on the other hand, if he recovers, he takes it all back because it's clear that the only reason why he was distributing it is because he thought he was going to die. That's called a shchivra in everything. Then you have a shchivra b'mixus, person who's dying, but he only distributes some of his properties. If he distributes some of his property, we're going to conclude, and we'll see some of it in the Gemara today, that on the one hand, you need a kinyan because you're giving it away as an ordinary gift. On the other hand, you can no longer change your mind because you're making a kinyan. Even though you recover, you cannot change your mind because you had enough to live on. Besides, you kept a lot of it. You just gave this away. You'll have enough to live on. So if you gave it wholeheartedly. Then we have a concept called mitzave machmas meis, which we'll introduce later. That is, if it's a preamble to what this person was about to distribute, he says, I'm dying, and then goes on to whatever he says. In that case, even if it's only a partial distribution, it's quite clear that the only reason why you're giving it away is because you thought you're dying. So even if it's only a partial distribution, even if you made a kinyan, and we'll learn more about this tomorrow, even if you made a kinyan, we'll say that if you recover, the whole thing falls apart, as if you made a contingent on the person passing away. Then we had the concept of mitzvah lekayim divrei hames. You have to carry out the wishes of a person who departs. But we already explained different answers of cases that's talking about if you gave it to a third person and you gave them instructions, not if I'm giving it myself. Gave them instructions, I gave them to hold it like a trust for the other people, biyad sholish, then we say mitzvah lekayim divrei hames. Okay, now having all that, let's learn the Gemara. I actually have to tell you, I found some of the Gemara difficult to just comprehend the practical side of it, as I will share with you as we go on. So the Gemara begins, the second word of the line, 3 lines above the white lines. Ime, the mother of Razutra Barsubia, Kasvinu Lelechase Razutra Barsubia. What happened was, remember, we learned a concept called mavrachas. Mavrachas is where a woman wants to hide her assets. She wants to get married, and she doesn't want the husband to take all these assets and come nifse malay, where he plucks the assets, he keeps the dividends, the paris. So she gives all the properties to someone that she trusts, and really only to hide them. And a husband only is entitled to the properties that he's aware of. Remember, the whole thing is because of shalom bayis. Only if he's aware. If he's not aware, he has no rights to it. So and everyone agrees, even though we had a machlekes in the Gemara, whether we had a machlekes in the Gemara, whether in Ksubis, whether we say that that the beneficiary gets to keep it or she gets it back, but everyone agrees we should make it clear that the only reason why she's giving it to this person is to hide her assets, then it does not belong to that person. So says the Gemara, she wanted to get married, so she wanted to hide the assets before the wedding because she wanted to get married without any of these assets. So what happened was she gave it over to her son, the mother of her son Abzutra, the boy in she wanted to get married to Rabzvid. Intzve, she did marry Rabzvid, but then Vigirsha, he divorced her. Didn't work out. Asya lekame de Rabbi Barabaya. So her son went to Rabbi Barabaya. Omri said, Mishumin Sube. She said, she made it clear she's doing it because she wants to get married and therefore she's hiding her assets. But instantly she got married. Tomorrow she got divorced. It's irrelevant. She got married, met the condition. So now this person can keep the assets. Because you come from a region called Memoloyi, Amritu Mili, you said Mili Muli, so you said things which are truncated, things which are cut off, things which are blemished. In other words, because you come, we already had this a short while ago. Because you are a descendant of Eli, Rameir came to a town. Everybody was dark hair. Nobody had gray hair in the head and the beard. And they asked them what's going on, and they said that nobody lives past a certain age, past 40, because they all pass away. Why? Because we are descendants of Eli, and there was a curse hanging over the family that nobody lives. So he said to them that Kabbalah won't help, Zevach Hamich doesn't help. But if you study Torah, especially if you do Torah and Gimel Chasadim, you'll live a longer life. So Rabbah studied Torah, 40 years old, he passed away. He was Rosh Hashiva for 22 years, at the age of 40, he passed away. His nephew, Abaya, who also, these are descendants from Eli, he not only studied Torah, but he also was generous, he gave Gimel Chasadim. He lived for 60 years. So he said, because you come from this family, that's why you came up with this weird idea. So he said very simply, even the opinion that said that if you're hiding your assets, it's the fact that you gave it to somebody, it belongs to that person. That's why she didn't reveal why she's doing it. Here she said, she's doing it to get married. But the problem is she's not married anymore. She got married for a very short time and then she was divorced. Therefore, she is entitled to get it back, and it's not really a gift. She never intended to gift him. She always wanted it back. There is a big shaila. What happens if she does remain married? Who gets to keep this asset? She gave it to the guy. Does the beneficiary get to keep the asset, which some Rishonim hold, and some say the Rashbam hold that, and others say that no, that nobody keeps the asset. At the end of the day, it comes back to her, not the husband and not the beneficiary. Next story. At night, we had another Gemara in Ksubas as well, where the mother of Mechama had 2 children. She had a son called Rami and a son Rabukva. And one day she wrote a star one morning she wrote a star to one son, and 2 hours later she wrote it to the other son. And the question is, so who's entitled to it? Because on a star, it doesn't say what hour it was done, just as a day. So from the star, it was not self-evident who was first, who was second. So we had a machlekes in the Gemara. Do we give it to the first star, or do we say, should the dayan, let the dayan decide, and then itself is an Angar Rashi tells us whether just takes a random guess who should end up with it, or he has to work out what was in the mind of the donor. Then it seems A while later, so that was a matnas body, an ordinary gift. It seems a while later she amassed more and more money, and now she was dying, and she repeated the same exercise again, but this time it's a matnas shchiv mira. So what happened is the mother of Rami Bachama Bu'urt at night, she wrote over all of her assets to Rami Bachama. That's it, shchiv. And what did we learn before? If you give away all your assets, you don't need a kinyan, but if she recovers, it all goes back to her. If she doesn't, it becomes that person's only after she passed away. But for the following morning, she changed her mind. So it's the second time it happened. She gives first everything to one son and then everything to the second son. Also, he said, well, I was first, I should claim the entire inheritance. Ukme ben Chasa, and he did. Shesha said, you were first. Also, the book of Ukme went to the Nachman. Ukme ben Chasa, Nachman ruled, it's the second. Also, Rav Shesha, the Kamer Nachman, Shesha went to Nachman, Amalei, my time, why did you decide that the second person that had to do it, my star was written first? There's no argument there. It was written at night, so it's mine. And is it Mishum the Hodrib? If you claim the reason is because at night she actually wanted to give it to Rami, but in the morning she changed her mind and gave it to Rami Marukva. Well, Shchiva, she died afterwards, so therefore whatever she put in train should happen. And the first thing she put in train was the Shchiva mine. On Malay, he said back to him, if she, let's say, would have recovered, she would retain all the properties for herself. Is she can also therefore change her mind. She makes a will, she could change her mind on the will and change the beneficiary. So he asked Absheshes, maybe perhaps maybe Shmuel said only that the person recovered gets to keep it for himself. But able to give it to someone else. Who says? He said to him, yes, if you did a matna shchivara and then you recover, you can give it to anybody you want. In fact, even if you don't recover, you can change your mind until bein la'atzmi, bein la'acha. Now, what's going on here? What's the argument of Rav Sheshes and Rav Nachman? The argument is very simple. How do we remember? The Chachamim made a special legislation. Normally, once a person passes away, he has no control anymore. The purse strings of anything belongs to the heirs. Over here, we said that anything that he said while he was alive, kiksuvin umesurno, as if it was recorded, written down on the star, and after the person died, that's when the transfer takes place. And even though normally it wouldn't work, that's the special takaz chamin. The reason why we did it is, as we learned, we don't want this person to feel helpless and needless, and that itself will contribute to this person premature passing away. So the question is, how do we view that? Do we say that when he said, or she said, whatever it is, I'm giving this house to that person, do we say that that person already has a connection to the house, but not, it doesn't really belong to that person, but after the shchivmera passes away, then retrospectively, it goes back to the moment he said that he's giving it over? Or do we say, no, nothing happened while he's alive. It all starts, it only gets activated after he died. There's no retrospectivity at all. And that's the argument. Rav Sheshes says that since she died, it's one thing she recovers, she takes it all back. But since she died, so now we are going to distribute according to her wishes. We go back, it's retrospective to the first person that she gave it to, because that's when it all began. And Rav Nachman says, no, nothing happens until the person passes away. So the first will that she wrote is meaningless. It's the last will that counts, because that's when she passes away, we go back to the very last will. That's their argument. Further, now what's problematic in this Gemara is, why didn't she divide it among both for children? This happened twice. First she gives it to one child, then she decided to give it to the other child, but only everything. Why not divide it between the two? Share it. But let's go further. It's even harder to understand further on. The Gemara continues. The mother of Amr Chassid. She had a sack full of contracts, loan contracts. When she died, Amra, she said, while she was dying, Leheve la Amram Bri. I want it all to belong to my son. She had a few sons. I wanted to go to Amram. Asu Achui Lekamed Rab Nachman. The brother came before Rab Nachman, and Amrulei, and the brothers came to Rab Nachman and said to Rab Nachman, why should he end up with it? He didn't make a kinyan meshicha, and because he didn't make a kinyan meshicha, it should be part of the estate, and we should divide it equally. He says here, um, so what actually happened was he made some kind of a kinyan, and then it says either she distributed everything to Rabbi Amram, so therefore it should belong to Rabbi Amram, but they claim he didn't make kinyan. And Nachman answers, whatever your mother said, as if it's recorded. Or they actually, the Rambam says that Rabbi Amram made a kinyan, Rabbi Amram Chasidah. He made a kinyan, but the brothers that came along and said he didn't make Mashiach. So what does that mean? If he made a kinyan, what do you mean they came along to Rabbi Nachman and said, oh, but he didn't make a Mashiach? There's two purposes of a kinyan in this case. One is a kinyan to actually be koine the item itself, and one is a kinyan that her words should be to take effect. It's a kinyan on the words or a kinyan on the object. So what happened was the Rabbi Amram made a kinyan with her, and the handkerchief was that whatever she said should happen. But he didn't make a kinyan with the actual stars. So they thought, the brothers thought, because he did not make, there was only a matama, a matlas barish, no, there were other assets as well. So they thought because he did not make a kinyan, he didn't make a kinyan with the actual contracts, maybe it doesn't, there's no transfer. That's what they thought. And Nachman said, no, you don't need a kinyan for the actual contracts because whatever they say is as if it's written down. Say more further. Achte de Rav Tuvi bar Amasna, the sister of Tuvi bar Amasna, Kesavtinu in the Chosel Rav Tuvi bar Amasna. She decided to give over everything. She was dying. She decided to give everything over to her brother Rav Tuvi, but she had another brother. B'tzaf in the morning, Lepanya in the afternoon. Also, Rav Achdevui bar Amasna, Rav Tuvi's brother Rav Achdevui, found out what his sister did. Bochala, he went to her house and he began to cry, appealing to her emotions. Amala, he said, you realize what you did here? It's not just the money. If people are going to hear that you gave your entire wealth to Rav Tuvi, and you didn't give it to me, you know what people are going to say? Tongues are going to go wagging and say that I'm not the Talmud Chacham. I didn't deserve it, but my brother did. It's not true. Amala, he said, Hashta now, Amri Mar, they will say, Tzur b'merabon. They'll say, that person, my brother Rav Tuvi, is a Tzur b'merabon, a young rabbi. But Mar, but I, Rabbi Achdevui, is not a rabbi. So what did she do? Kasavtinu Nele. She decided, okay, she took all the assets and gave it to him. Also Lekamed Rav Nachman. So they went before Rav Nachman and they want to know who it belongs to, the first person or the second person. Same story. Amalei, he said, this is the rule. If it's a matna shchibra, where if the person recovered, everything falls apart. Chayzer is chayzer matnosin. So it means nothing really happened. As we explained before, nothing happens till after the person died. So therefore, they could change the last will and testament whenever they want. This is actually quite a difficult remark. If people are going to say that the first Rav Tuvi received all the money and he must be the Talmud Chacham and Rav Tuvi isn't, so what's he saying? Give it all to me. So now what are people going to say? That Rav Tuvi is the Talmud Chacham, Rav Tuvi isn't. What right did he have to go and create false rumors about his brother? The same argument he had about himself, he's now creating a situation for his brother. That's not fair. That's not right. Number one. Number two, why didn't she just divide? Okay, instead of giving it all out to her brother, why didn't you just say, okay, I'll give half to Rav Tuvi and half to you? Why now give it, transfer it all to Rav Tuvi? Something wrong and there's something missing here. Apart from that, there's a whole subject that we learned in Gemara Kedushin called an Oni Hamahapech Becharara. If there's a person they're trying to, let's say, purchase a house, and he's negotiating everything else, and you come over, a second person comes over, and you see the nice house, good price, you want to gazump him, you're not allowed to. Because the Ani Mahapecher, he's looking there for the biscuit. Why do you have to go take this house? Buy some another house. You're called a Russia. And as Rashi said, you're allowed to go and bankrupt him. So it's called the Ani Mahapecher. An argument between Rashi and Tesis. What about if you see somebody searching of the wallet out there with money, and the first person saw it and is running in that direction, but you're closer, and you see what's happening, but that person is an Oni Mahape B'Charara. So the second person runs faster and he gets there first. And he wants the money for himself. So there's an argument Rashi and Taisus. Taisus says that does not fall under the category of Anim Habacharado, because you can't say to this person who got there first, oh, go find yourself another wallet. Where are you going to find wallets? It only applies to buying a house or buying clothes, buying somewhere else. But Rashi also makes no difference. It's so unethical. The guy is already there and he's looking and working at it, leave him be. So over here, once Abtubi already was promised that he's getting at the money, succeed and learn everything else, and now the brother Achtabuyi is coming to sister and convincing her to give it to him rather than to the brother. That is a case of Ani Mahapi B'charara. That first brother already got it, and now the second guy is coming to take it. Unless the only way possible for that is the first brother had no inkling or no idea that he got it. So Ani Mahapi B'charara is that consciously the person is trying to pursue something and you're coming in and trying to gazump him. But maybe in this story, Abtuvi had no idea that his sister was assigning all her assets to him. The other one, Achatagui, found out that he therefore approached his sister. So maybe that's how we can resolve. It's not a question of Anim HaProra, but where's the fairness and where's the logic? If she really wanted to get a Tuvi, and because he convinced her that people are going to insult me, so divide it. Nobody will insult anybody because we're both getting equal amounts. Why give it all to Rabbi Achatagui? I don't understand what happened here. But anyway, let's continue. The sister of Rabdimi Bar Yosef, Havale Pisketa de Pardisa. She had a little sliver of land, an orchard, and Kol Eimaz Davachosha. She was very paranoid. She was a hypochondriac. Every time she had a cold, she thought she was dying. So Kol Eimaz Davachosha. Every time that she got weak, Havale Mekanya Leinel. She'd rather return to her brother, and she would say to her brother, who was an Almeida, she would say to him, "You get to keep all my assets." And she said because she was dying. He thought she was dying. But as soon as she got better, she would go to the brother and say, "Give me back my assets." Anyway, after a number of times going through this experience, he was tired, and this is really crying wolf all the time. So what happened was, even once again she felt weak, and Rabbi she decided she must be dying. She sent him a message: "Come, Kani, and make a kinyan and take all the land from me." Sholach, he wrote back to her, "I've had enough. I'm not coming." So she understood that he doesn't want to come because she recovers every time and she takes it all back. But she wanted her brother next to her, so she sent him a message. Come, kni kol heicha the boys. I don't care what ruse you do any kinyan you want to make sure that it remains with you, and I cannot take it back. But come. Okay, so what he did, very clever. We learned before, if you distribute all of your assets, you're a shchimra. If you recover, you take them back. But if you distribute even most of the assets, and all you left behind was a koshu in the slowest amount, then it remains fixed. And even if you recover, you don't take it back. So what he did was he did not take the entire field. He left a part of the field for his sister. So now it's treated as a matnas bari, a healthy person's gift, and he made a kinyan, and therefore he can keep it, and that's it. Ozil, he went, Shaida, he left a piece behind. They made a kinyan. Sure enough, she got better. Hadrabah, she changed her mind. I want my property back. Also, she went, became Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, who was the head of the Bezin, sent a subpoena or a summons to Rav Dimi. He said, come. Well, also refused to come. Amari, he said, Rav Dimi said, what's it entirely for? I know I'm right. I left behind a piece of land. It's a matana, the matnas bari, leave me alone. And I made a kinyan. So therefore it's mine. I don't care if she got better. Sholach Rav Nachman was very tough, as we know from all the Gemaras, and he was the son-in-law of the head Reish Galusa, the chief exilrash. He said, if you don't show up, I will smite you with a thorn bush that doesn't produce blood. In other words, I'm going to put you in cherem. I'm not going to physically hurt you. I'm going to put you in cherem. He said, Nachman turned around to the witnesses who witnessed this whole event. When the sister said she was dying, what exactly happened when the sister said she's transferring the properties to her brother? They said to him, she said, Hachi, this is the words she said, Vai, woe is to me, the kamisa Hachi, to woe is me if this woman is dying. So Nachman said, So the context of her sentence was like this. Divrei Shchiv Mira is talking about, normally, the guy says, okay, I want the house to go to this son, my other things should go, my shares should go here. Over there, didn't mention a word about the fact that he was dying. So therefore we say that Divrei Shchiv Mira kiksuvim masurim. In this case over here, the woman said, I am dying and therefore I'm giving this to my brother. So in that case, it's as if she made it contingent on her death. So even though she does not distribute all of it, even though a kinyan was made, if she recovers, she takes it all back because it was made on a conditional way, in a conditional way. If Sir Nachman commented, in case of so having mitzvah machmas misa, she's giving instructions because she thought she was dying. So you can always change your mind. A little bit difficult to understand in this story. Rav Nachman summoned him to Din Torah. What was this? What did Jimmy say? I'm not coming. I know I'm right. You go to any Din Torah, whenever there's a dispute, there's a plaintiff and there's a defendant. Every Din Torah, the defendant believes they're right. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a Din Torah. He would just go ahead and pay whatever the plaintiff wants. So everybody thinks that they're right. So what right did Abdimi have to say I'm not fronting up to the Din Torah because I think I'm right? The pshat of here is that there's a big difference. A normal Din Torah is we're arguing the facts. What happened? You owe me, don't owe me. This is what happened. You did this. I did this. In this case, here, there's no dispute. Everyone agrees exactly what happened over here. She got sick. She gave the property. It's a halachic question. So Rav Dimi was so sure that the halach is with him because he said, I left some behind. So it's a matnas bari. So why should I come? I know the halach. And his error was because actually he didn't know the halacha. But in this case, because she prefaced her comments by saying, I'm dying, it changes everything. Saying about it further, now the Gemara is going to tease out the laws of a matana, a matnas shchimera, and a matnas bari. Actually, I skipped a line. Itma we learned matnas shchimera b'mixes. So somebody distributed only part of their assets. We treat it like a gift of a healthy person. But also has a certain feature similar to a person who is dying. In what way? Body will treat like a matnas body. If it recovers too late, since you kept some of the properties, which means you already took care of yourself, and which you gave away on the one hand. But on the other hand, we hold, not like we were saying till now, which we'll soon see that will change. We hold that you don't need a kinyan because at the end of the day, she's dying, or he's dying, and therefore you don't need a kinyan. And that's what Rav Nachman is saying. That you don't need a kinyan because the person is dying, so they meant it, and we don't want to exacerbate their death, and therefore you don't need a kinyan. Rabbi said to them, you guys are making up stories. Did I tell you, Nachman, don't attach empty buckets of Nachman? Nachman never said that. Nachman actually said, not that I agree with him, but Nachman actually said, says Rabbi, in every respect, it's a matnas body, only the partial distribution. You make a kinyan, and then you can never change your mind. Okay, now Rabbi to Nachman, even though you said that, I have a problem. Based on the Mishnah that we just learned. It says in the Mishnah, what happens? The Shchibara gave away most of his assets, but Shaya, Karka Kosher, left behind, retained ownership of a piece of property. The Mishnah says, the Matana remains. Nowhere does the Mishnah make a prerequisite that you had to make a kinyan. It seems that even if you did not make a kinyan, the Matana remains. The Rabbanon are right, not Rav Nachman. My lab, the economy didn't make a kinyan. Well, you know the economy. Somebody made a kinyan. The Mishnah didn't bother telling us, but it's talking about you made a kinyan, and therefore the matana remains, and you cannot change it, and that's that. So what happens in the next part of the Mishnah? What happened? You distributed all of your assets, and you're telling me he's talking about you made a kinyan, so you made a kinyan with the person who's dying, and he gave you all of his assets. Yet if the person recovers, he can take it all back. Why? If you made a kinyan, once you made a kinyan, that's it. It's final. Who cares if you give away all the assets? Look at the end. That the matana that last takes it all back. But if you tell me why not? Well, he said to him, this is what Shmuel said. Shmuel said if a Shechimera is dying, gives away all of his assets. Even though they made a kinyan and everything else, because he only did it thinking that he was going to die, Omar, he recovers, chayzer. He takes it all back. Why? What's the logic? There was a kinyan. Because you do, it's clear. The reason why he was doing all this is because he thought he was dying. So it's as if he made it conditional. Question number 3. Question, and it says in the Mishnah that was a man called Reichel, had children, and his wife, or their mother, she was very sick. And she said, and she was dying, I want my brooch to be given over to my daughter. They don't inherit, I want her to have this. And the value of it is 12 mana. And then what happened was, Amazing, she died. Now, nobody doesn't mention it. She made a kinyan with the daughter, nothing. She died, became with the Vara, and they fulfilled her wishes. No, but there's no kinyan, and surely they own more things than just that brooch. So what happened? So we answer the brooch. More answers. Hasam b'mitzave machmas misa. Again, in the context of her dying, that's why she gave it. So therefore, it's as if she made it conditional. A man says, give this get to my wife, but they didn't actually give it till he died. Or this emancipation. This is a letter of emancipation to David. But before they had a chance to give it to him, he died. You can no longer give it to him after he died because it's useless. But if he said tnu mana leplani, if he gave him instructions to give actually money to a person, the mason died toward the bottom of the page. If he said tnu mana leplani, give money to that person, the mace, and he died, yitnu la'achamisa. Now it's clear we're talking about here there was no kinyan, because when it comes to a get, you don't make a kinyan with somebody else to give the get. The get you have to place in her hand. The nosan biyada place in her hand, or she sends an agent, a proxy. So the shlich kabbalah, so it's as if you gave it into her hand. So l'chayda, there's no kinyan available. You don't make a kinyan suda with somebody and on behalf of her. Either she has to receive it or her shlich. So since there's no kinyan, so how is it that when he gave money, surely there was more money involved than what he had? How is it when he said give that $100 to that person, the din is that you have to carry it out? Where's the kinyan? There's no kinyan, and it's only a partial distribution. So Yimor says, how do you know the lekol? So Yimor answers very simply: Dumya the get, it has to be similar to a get. Ma get lav bar kinyan. By a get, it's not something that you acquire through a kinyan. You got to place it in her hand. Is av hainami lekonim minay. Over here also, you're not koine. That means that because it's the aggregate. You're drawing a contrast. The difference between a get and money. By a get, we say that you can't give it after the guy died because he said give it to her. But by money, you will carry out his wishes, and they're both the same case. No kinyan. But since it's only a partial distribution, why is it that you have to carry out his words if there's no kinyan? So the Gemara will give you the same answer again, the same answer we gave in every single Mishnah. This is a different kind of a case. This is in the context of him dying, and he said in his he prefaced his remarks, I am dying, and therefore I want to make this distribution. In that case there, we say that it's mamash like a shchimera, and furthermore, even if they made it, you don't need a kinyan, but even if they made a kinyan, and he recovers, it falls apart. However, Rav Huna Bereyed Rav Yeshua argues, and the Gemara will reject it. He says, I believe that mitzvah machmas mitzvah ba'alma ba'kinyan. I believe that if he only gave a partial distribution, even if the person prefaces their comments by saying, I'm dying, nevertheless, it's you still need a kinyan because only a partial distribution. So if you really believe you're dying, why are you retaining ownership in some of the properties? So therefore we say that you need a kinyan. That's him. How am I going to answer all of these missions? All these missions seem to say that it's effective. They're all talking about we distributed all of this. When it says $100, that's everything. The jewelry to the daughter, that's everything. All of these missions that seems to say that when if he recovers, he gets it all back, is talking about Mechalik Kol Nechasim, gave everything away. That's treated like a real shchibur. So the Gemara concludes, we just totally disagree, Rabbi Huna B'Rei Yeshua, the Hilchasa, Matna Shchiv Rabbi mixes by Kinyan. If you give only a partial distribution, you do need a Kinyan, but it doesn't unravel. And even though he died, it stays with that person. And sorry. And if you didn't make a kinyan and the guy died, you don't have to carry through what he said. Only if you made a kinyan. What about mitzvah machar mitzvah? He prefaces his comment by saying that I'm dying. You don't need a kinyan. And even if he made a kinyan, it doesn't matter. It's like contingent on the fact that the person is dying. But who demaced? So only if he died, provided he died. Omad, if he recovered, he can take it all back. I forgot the condiment, even though they made a kinyan. That finishes the sugya, and tomorrow sort of not really a new sugya, but continuing exploring different arguments in Shmuel Rav. Okay, have a good one.